Jain. I'm the founder and CEO of the Advanced Cells Group, and one of our divisions is known as Koshika. At Koshika, we do we produce stem cells as well as primary cells for research purposes. We are running this series of webinars to educate fellow scientists, students, and everybody who's interested in the industry to understand nuances of cell culture, nuances of a lot of the techniques that we currently use in the lab. As we all know that cellular biology is probably the most sought after science when it comes to the study of pharmacogenesis, drug discovery, toxicology studies. Basically, it makes the base of everything, every medical research that currently we do. And one of the challenges, the biggest challenge I would say that we face as scientists is reproducibility. Reproducibility of results, reproducibility of whatever we have found in the lab. Many times we see that somehow this reproducibility does not take place, and thus all our experiments, whatever we do in the lab does not actually get into the market. So today we are going to talk about repairing the reproducibility. The speaker today is a very eminent scientist, Dr. Amrish Kumar Sharma. Dr. Sharma is currently the associate professor at Lovely Professional University and has vast experience in research and publishing different kind of papers, as well as working on things like the Ebola vaccine. So Dr. Amrish, if I can just start by asking some very few questions. I know that you have worked intensively in life sciences companies such as Biocon and Bavarian Nordic. And now you are into academics. What kind of difference do you actually feel coming from industry to academics or academics to industry? How does that transition actually take place?
It is basically the passion behind working for our objective. Industry is totally different in India. They are totally project centric. They are totally objective centric. While academics are very much, they are theoretical. They are this is because of, or you can say this is due to the lack of industry academia relation, or the kind of a bridging of industry academia, which is actually happening in US and Europe. If you see over there, most of the projects which are handled by the industry, they are taken care of by the academics. So there is a continuous flow of information between academics and in the industry. So that happens, that creates a kind of a new culture of if I say in industry, people are mostly objective oriented. They are more into working on a kind of, I can say, the work which has already been done. They are improvising the research rather than making something new, as far as my experience is concerned. And in academics, they are working in a different domain. They're trying to gel into an industry system, but still we have to go way ahead in making such kind of environment.
Thank you. Thank you. So without taking any more time, I would like to invite Dr. Amrish to please start his presentation. And we look forward to a great session with you, sir. Yours podium, please. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think, good morning all. I think everybody is looking into this slide. So I thank Dr. Vipul to give me this opportunity to speak on repairing reproducibility, basically using primary cells and optimized media condition. So I thank the whole team of this Koshika to give me this opportunity. Now I will just start with the topic called as repairing reproducibility, and this is very much concerned to primary cell culture experiments and the optimized media system, which is which we have to look into while improving the reproducibility of an experiment. Now, I think a very good introduction has been given by Dr. Vipul regarding why we need to have a reproducibility of an experiment. If you see that why we need to have a reproducibility, because you see around the world, uh, if you see there's a lack of interest which is surging on due to the failure of the experiments in biological research, and those failure of experiments in biological research is because of the failure in reproducing the experiments, and that leads to a lot of uh, loss, monetary loss, and that lead to distrust uh, in the companies or the academic system who are looking into these such kind of programs. So we have to look, we have to see that what all things are there which are very much hampering this reproducibility problem, because this is very important to look into. Now, if I see you see, if I go by the definition that why we need to why we need a reproducibility experiment in primary cell system, most of the drug discovery programs are taken care by in vitro research on the first go, and then by in vitro experiment on the second go, and at last we go for clinical, preclinical and the clinical studies to prove the efficacy of a drug which we have screened out through in vitro, in vivo, and clinical studies. So if we start with a screening program, an effective screening program, by developing an assay, a bioassay, which can screen out the best possible drug for carrying out for the clinical studies, that will save a lot of money and time of an individual or a company who is investing into such kind of drug discovery program. But the problem is, due to peer pressure of publishing paper, due to peer pressure of getting rise into an industry or in a academic system, we are we are actually picking up the best out of the rest and throwing away the small details which are actually taking care, or which are actually uh, you know are very responsible for the reproducibility of an experiment, and that is why we need to address this situation as early as possible. So why experimental reproducibility is critical? Because the use of cell-based system has increasingly replaced the in vivo research, and the application of in vitro models enjoys a ever-growing popularity. So in vivo research is on high demand because they are high throughput, they are fast, they can screen a drug of a big library. Means they can screen a drug of and they can give a clear-cut picture of the efficacy of a drug in a very early scenario. And then further, to avoid repeating past mistakes, high standards of reproducibility and reliability is established and maintained in the field of in vitro biological research. So it's very important when we start screening of a drug, we need to have a cell culture platform which is highly efficacious, which is highly high throughput. And if we miss out the small details which we actually manage in our labs, and we only publish good things, that actually tends to that leads to failure of the experiment, and ultimately a loss of trust in biological community or the scientific community. Now, so what is the takeaway of this experimental reproducibility is the defined assay performed with a defined in vitro model yield identical results no matter where and when it is performed. So it should be very much consistent in its uh, results. So it's very important to see that whatever we make, it should be highly consistent. So I will discuss two small case studies which I have taken from our literature reviews, where it tells you about the importance of experimental reproducibility, because uh, this is a very important area to be addressed by the scientific community to get the best possible result in a very small frame of time. Now, the first case study talks you about the cytotoxic study. Here the A549 cells, the adenocarcinomic human alveolar basal epithelial cells, were purchased from two independent sources and they were cultured for doing the cytotoxicity study. And under the strict conditions, what was found that the EC50 value of two A549 cultures upon the cadmium sulfate, the CDSO4 treatment, differed by a factor of 2. So same condition, same cell line, everything same, and you are observing a difference of twofold over here, and that will lead to a lot of functional changes as far as screening is concerned. So what was the fault which led to a difference of twofold over here is the cell line authentication. So whatever cell line lab A was using, that was not authenticated, or you can say you can't claim that who was using authenticated cell line or who was not. But here the cell line authentication was discovered to be one of the main influence assessing the or influencing the assay results. Similarly, the short tandem repeat sequence revealed a partial chromosome deletion in the one of the culture. So these are the cell line authentication and the STR sequencing. These two proved the difference in results for the same condition. That is something which is biological. When I talk about the technical aspect, a small condition of PBS washing also led to a great change in the assay performance or the assay outcome. So that is very, very important to see that whatever we are doing while handling an experiment, even a small step of PBS washing is creating a big uh, difference in the result output. So this is why the reproducibility experiment or the is very, very, the experiments need to be validated. It should be standardized to make it more reproducible. So if I go with the second case study, you see over here a memory epithelial cell line MCF10A was taken, and the growth rate inhibition by anti-cancer drug was basically evaluated, which addressed the inter and intra-study center variation and identified factors contribute to insufficient reproducibility. Means there was a change in the result or the outcome of an experiment when it was conducted in inter or intra-study center variation. So here also we have to take care of the thing that whatever cell lines we are using, whatever conditions we are using, it should be very much consistent to a place or to a situation. Now, the 5 research centers applied the cells and the chemicals of the same stock. Astonishing center-to-center variations up to 200-fold was observed. It's very, very surprising. So this 200-fold difference in the observation just by handling the experiment inter and intra-study centers, that lead to a change in the reproducibility of an experiment. So when we are talking about this, let's say lab A or lab B or lab C, anywhere around India or the world, if they are carrying such kind of experiment, they need to take care of what all factors are there which are making such kind of changes. Now, here what they have observed is the self-seeding was the main culprit. So a small variation in the self-seeding can lead to the functional change of the experiment concerned. Because if you are culturing the cells which is too low, or if you're culturing a cell too high, that will lead to have a different functional aspect in the result outcome. Now, I will coming to the point. Now we have to see that since our webinar today is basically to look into the factors affecting the reproducibility of primary cell cultures and the media or the optimized media which is affecting those experiments. So my whole webinar will be very much focused on looking into the mistakes of cell culture experiment, basically the primary cell culture experiment, and how we can troubleshoot it. Because once you are doing experiment, we need to take care of the mistakes and rectifying it. Then only you can make your experiment reproducible. Whatever, is, there are many things which happen spontaneous, and those spontaneous mistakes create a great variability in the result outcome. So we can start with this. So my experiments, my webinar is very much focused to primary cell culture. So first, we will talk about the factors uh, which are basically governing the in vitro variability of an experiment. Now, if you see this slide, we have different factors like cell type, substrate, growth conditions, passaging, and reporting. So these are 5 factors which leads to in vitro variability. Now, if I say in vitro variability concerned to cell type, now these are the factors like contamination, the cell ID, basically the cell authentication, and the characterization of cell, which leads to in vitro variability. When I talk about substrate, it is very, very important to look into the plastic area, because we have 2 kinds of interaction in cell lines. We have a specific interaction and non-specific interaction. And generally, when we talk about the coating of the plates, the coating of the plates is highly specific to the cells which we are growing on it. So whether we are using a gelatin, or whether you are using a collagen or a fibronectin, or we are using L-lysine, we have to look into what kind of cells we are growing and what kind of inference they are making in further proliferation and differentiation of the cells. Similarly, we have growth conditions, which is again very much responsible for the in vitro variability. Now here, you see, the time of seeding is very much important while looking into the consistency of a result. The time of seeding and the time of treatment is something which you can say controls the cell density. The temperature of the culture conditions again maintains the control the functional aspect of the cell culture, and the pH, the 2D and the 3D nature, because here when we talk about 2D, most of the transformed cell lines, they are cultured on the flask, and they are basically 2D in nature. And when we talk about 3D, the primary cell cultures which we culture, they are directly taken from the tissue. They have a 3D phenotype. Now this 3D phenotype, when they grow in a 2D platform, basically on the culture plates, we need to take care of the conditions which we provide over it, because when you are moving a 3D phenotype to a 2D condition, there will be a great variability, and that is where there is a challenge. We have to see that how to overcome this challenge, how to maintain a 3D condition in the plate, so that whatever primary cultures we are culturing, they should give the exact output of the result which is actually happening in vivo system. Now, passaging or the subculture is again a very important factor while looking into the functional aspect of in vitro experiments. Now, these are the medium change, the trypsination activity, the pipetting, and the centrifugation. These are the 4 variables which actually controls the passaging event. So when we are doing passaging, we have to look into the pipetting, the centrifugation, the medium change, and the trypsin activity while culturing a primary cells. And reporting is something, a data analysis means how you report experiment, what kind of statistical analysis you are doing, what kind of studies, um, what kind of factors you are looking into. So those are very, very important things while you are coming out with or while we are processing a result for an in vitro experiment. Now, I will not go into details of this. This is basically, this slide tells you about the difference in primary cell line and the continuous cell line. You can see primary cell lines are moreover, they are coming from a 3D phenotype, and and they are highly sensitive to culture conditions. They have a limited expansion capacity, and they are highly affected by density and confluency. So we have to take care of this thing. They are highly affected by density and confluency, and they are also highly affected to culture conditions, because I told you that they are coming from a tissue system, and we are plating in a 2D flask system. So we have to look into the conditions so as to minimize the um, noise which has been created because of this transfer. And again, we have to look into the nutritional requirements, because since this is a primary culture directly taken from the tissues, we need to take care of what kind of supplements we need to provide, because each and every primary cultures need to have a specific kind of supplement, nutritional supplement. That is, they are not like continuous cell lines where the nutrient supplements are very much common to most of the cell lines used. And in case of continuous cell line, the they are easier to transfect, and they have a high proliferative rate, and there are chances of great genetic and phenotypic drift. And that's why uh, right now in today's scenario, most of the industries are shifting from continuous cell line to primary cell line. Why? Because they need to create a more in vivo kind of a condition in the flask, so to give a better results rather than to just give a result which can be done by using a continuous cell line. So that is very, very important. Continuous cell lines are very easy to grow, easy to maintain, but the results which we get is highly variable. You might fail while you transfer the same kind of result, or when you expect same kind of results in a in vitro in a in vivo model. So primary cell lines are highly accepted right now nowadays. Now, when we talk about primary cell culture, it is very, very important to know that what is the phenotypic difference between the primary cell culture and the continuous cell culture. You need to know the morphology of the cells before culturing into the plates. Because if you see over here, this is primary retinopigment epithelial cell, and these are the continuous cell lines. Now, among these all are retinopigment epithelial cells having different morphologies. And if you see this middle slide, this is a continuous cell line which is very much looking like a fibroblast. So one can see this slide and they may bluff, or they may get confused at what it means, whether we are seeding a primary cell or a retinopigment epithelial cell or a skeletal muscle cell or a fibroblast, because they are very much looking like a myotube. So we have to have a prior knowledge of the shape of the cell or the morphology of the cell. Now, the second point is, when you look into the morphology, we have three morphologies for the same kind of cell. One is the primary cell line, and rest two are the secondary cell lines or the continuous cell lines. Now, there is a change in morphology, and subsequently there could be a change in functional aspects also. So all these three cell lines might give three different functional results. So we have to take care of the results also. So this is very, very important while culturing a primary cell or a continuous cell and their functional aspect. Now, the second very important aspect over here is we should know about how a primary cell line or a continuous cell line differ from each other. If you see over here, we have used certain markers which are defining this primary and continuous cell line. This BN5 is the mouse brain endothelial cells. Here, this is a primary mouse brain endothelial cells, and this is the secondary or the continuous mouse brain endothelial cells. You see, this continuous cell lines are moreover a kind of a spindle shaped structure, and they are more condensed structure. So if you see the morphology at this level also, you are seeing that there are a lot of tight junctions in between these two cell lines, and here they are moreover different kind of a morphology they are showing in a different condition. So you need to know about the morphology, and the and that can be done through various biomarkers. So these F-actin and occlutin, they are the biomarkers which are representing these cell lines. So with the help of these biomarkers, you can differentiate uh, these two conditions and validate it. Because everything starts with morphology. Everything starts with seeding a cell. So once you seed it, it is established in the cell culture. It gets it proliferates. It proliferates, and then further it gets differentiated. So differentiation is something which we need to make it functional. So if your cell lines are not differentiated, everything is waste. So you have to know that whatever cell line you are culturing, it should have a full differentiated value. Now, I will tell you the mistakes which we actually uh, do, that might be spontaneous, that might be because of any reason, which actually fails your result. They have outcome. Every experiment has an outcome, but those outcomes might not be reproducible when you are talking about lab to lab or center to center. And if you're really screening a drug, and if you want to make it reproducible, you need to take care of these small mistakes, or you can say rather very, very important factors which are important in drug screening using primary cell lines. So the first mistake what we do is, when we talk about primary cell line, is that being unfamiliar with the cell type you're culturing. So before you are culturing a primary cell, you should be very much aware of what kind of morphology they bear. See, if you see over here, we have three primary cell lines. One is human keratinocyte, the another one is human vascular endothelial cells, and third one is fibroblast. This fibroblast is more of spindle shape. Keratinocytes have a different kind of a shape. So all three different primary cells have three different morphology. So that is very, very important. Why it is important? Why? Because when there is a cross contamination means when there is a mix of a culture. Because when we isolate a primary cell out of a tissue, you are never sure, and it is really very difficult to get a pure culture. And when you are not getting a pure culture, that is going to actually compromise with your experimental result. I'll tell you one example over here. You see this slide. You see there is a contamination of a secondary culture in a particular cell line. Now this is a cell culture in which you see this bordered area. These are the another kind of a cells growing in between this. This is a kind of a cross contamination of cell line, and that may actually lead to a variability in your experimental result. You will be very much sure, you will be very much happy that my cells are confluent, they are getting differentiated, and whatever drug you put into for drug induction, they might give a result. But again, when you when you perform the same experiments two or three times, maybe center to center, there will be a variability. Why? Because of such kind of cross contamination. Now, these cross contamination may supersede, or they may mask the effect of the real cells which are culturing in this plate. So again, we have to see what is the efficacy of these cells and what are the efficacy of these cells. So whether there shouldn't be a possibility where these cross contaminating cell lines supersede or marks the effect of these actual families we are going to face. Second mistake we do is, I told you that we think that primary cells are 100% pure. No, they are never 100% pure, because we are isolating from a tissue, and tissue is basically a chunk of, or you can say a mesh of cells. Out of those mesh of cells, you have to pick out the best one, or the cell of interest. So the screening a cell of interest is not that easy. It's a very tough task. For that, we need to have different strategy. We have to look into different selective media and other culture conditions. So primary cells are rarely 100% pure. Rather, we make best of our efforts to make the culture conditions so that the pure cell type can come out. The third is, primary cells can proliferate indefinitely. Means just like continuous cell line, we can culture, subculture, and make a good stock of it and store it, and they will be as viable as your secondary cell lines. No, this is a third mistake which we do, and that lead to your experimental result difference in reproducibility of the result. Why? Because when you are culturing a cell, when you are establishing a cell out of a tissue into a plate, they are highly effective at that instant. When you are subculturing it one time, two times, three times, and continuously, what happens that these slowly proliferating cells are getting diluted off after each subculture, and the highly proliferative cells are actually establishing themselves. So might be those slowly proliferative cells which are of your interest, or which are actually giving a result for those cell lines, are diluted or washed off, and you are simply maintaining a primary cell which is actually a junk. It's simply kind of giving only a proliferative capacity. So that may compromise your drug screening result. So whatever drug you are putting in and you are expecting a result, there will be a variability in those results. So try to restrict your primary cell cultures to minimum passaging to minimum subculture so that you can get best of it. So for that, you need to first of all have to put great effort in purifying them. Now, the fourth mistake which we do is that thawing vial in water bath for an extended period of time. We generally store the cells in cryo vial, basically in liquid nitrogen or in cryo freezers. And then when we have to revive it and plate it in a culture, we thaw it. Generally, thawing should be of a very small or a small span of time. It should not be extended to a good amount of time. Generally, what we do is we take out the cell, we put it into the tray and keep it inside the water bath, and just we go for having some tea. That is not recommended. If you are putting those cells for a good amount of time in a water bath, let's say 15 minutes, 20 minutes, again, that is going to lose a viability. So what we need to do is, you see this structure, you hold the primary cell vial, keep it inside the water bath and slowly rotate it, mix it, turn it, and then as soon as it gets thawed, means it returns to a liquid state, you just take it out. Don't keep it exposed in the water bath for too long. Now, second step, what we don't do or we actually forget to do is spraying those wires with 70% ethanol, because and that is basically a kind of source of contamination, because the water which we are using maintained at 37 degrees centigrade, and they are highly prone to bacterial and fungal contamination. So whenever we are taking out a vial, uh, that has to be sprayed with 70% ethanol, so that those contaminations are uh, gone off, and then you further go for next step. That is very, very important to avoid contamination. Mistake number 5, what we do generally is, after thawing the cells, we centrifuge them. Generally, why? Because while we cryopreserve a cell line, we keep it under 10% DMSO concentration. DMSO is a chemical component, a chemical compound generally we use to cryopreserve a cell line. It actually prevents the cell to crystallize, because the cells are in a media, and though media may get crystallized because of the presence of water molecules inside it. So to prevent the crystallization, we generally use DMSO at 10% concentration, which is highly, highly toxic at room temperature. And they are least toxic at your minus 196 degrees centigrade in a cryo condition. Given to the cells, which may destroy them, which may damage them. So everybody is listening to me? Are you listening me? Hello?
Yes, Dr. Amrish, we can hear you fine.
Yeah. So we should not centrifuge them. Rather, we should dilute the cells at the room temperature to an extent where the DMSO concentration reduces to 0.1%. Generally, we go for 100-fold dilution. So centrifugation should be avoided at this time. It is a very fast process. We centrifuge at 1000 RPM or maybe 1500 RPM or maybe at 500 RPM. That may create a loss in viability. And you know, the primary cell lines, they're highly sensitive to culture conditions. If you're losing viability at the vial level only, you are going to further lose the viability when you're plated. So it is highly recommended that you should not centrifuge, rather you dilute it so that the DMSO concentration reaches to 0.1%, and that is least toxic. And then when you establish the cell line into a plate, don't disturb it. Don't disturb it for at least 16 hours. People have a curiosity that, okay, let us see that whether my cells are fixed or not, whether my cells are working or not. So after every 4 hours, they take out the cell and see under the microscope and then keep it. So those disturbances also create a lot of difference in the experimental result. So don't disturb for at least 10 to 16 hours. Let them settle, and then you can do a media change. Or maybe if you are really very scared about your result, you can go for a media change after maybe 8 hours. But no, it is recommended that at least leave the cells for at least 16 hours so that they are established. Now, the mistake number 6, what we do is that we generally pipette the cells very vigorously, because primary cells are mostly clumped. They are more uh, globular. They are most clumpy or bulky in nature. So, in order to break those bulkiness, in order to break the cells fine, so that they may spread into the plates, we generally pipette the cells too much, and that lead to reduction in viability of the cells. So that is really, in case of continuous cells, we go for it. We homogenize the cells by uh, continuous pipetting, aspiration and further dispersion. We do it quite long. But in case of primary cells, it should be avoided. It should be taken care of that a minimum pipetting is done while placing the cells into the plate. Now, the next mistake is allowing the primary cells to become too confluent. It's a very, very important thing, because because we are shifting towards a differentiation process. So you know that once the cells are proliferated, they occupy a good space inside the flask. We change the medium condition so that they may differentiate, they may attain the functional aspect. They become functional, because unless and until they are not functional, whatever drug screening we are going to do, whatever study we are going to do, it is going to fail. But when we are talking about cell culture, it is highly recommended that you subculture the cells when it reaches to 90% confluence. Because when you are making it overconfluent, let's say 100%, and you're putting trypsin, there you need more exposure of trypsin to the full confluent cells. And because of high cell-cell interaction, because you know that we have cell-cell and cell matrix interaction in the plates, we have integrin proteins, clamidin and cladarins, which are actually looking into those interactions. Those cell interactions are highly condensed, and the cells not easily break up apart when they are highly confluent. And second thing, they shift towards senescence when they are highly confluent because of some kind of change in the polarity in the plate. So we have to look into that. Even if the primary cell culture reaches to 85%, 90%, split them, subculture them, rather than wait for 100% confluency. Because 100% confluency will lead to overexposure of trypsin that may kill the cells and further reduce the viability. Now, the next mistake is the subculturing the primary cells frequently will improve the health, morphology, and the purity in due course of time. Generally, we do it because what is the nature of primary cell is that you take out you isolate the primary cells from the tissues, and then you subculture it, you split it. And why we do subculturing? So as to minimize the cross contamination, so as to get a pure culture out of it. But again, uh, that that has to be minimized again, because when you are subculturing it, you are also diluting off the less proliferating cells in the plate. You are diluting off those cells which are highly susceptible to trypsinization. You are diluting off those conditions we are less susceptible to medium conditions. So try to establish the primary cells and get the cells, get the screening of the drugs in minimum passages, because that is again very, very important. We are over, because when you are doing subculturing over and over and over again, you are actually trypsinizing it over and over and over again. And more you trypsinize a cell, you are actually playing with the health of the cell. They will not be happy, and a stressful cell will always give you this stressful result. Okay, and then again will be a burden on the owner. So the this is very, very important while looking into the purity. So we need to minimize the subculturing. We need to establish the cells and try to get the results in early passages. Now, the mistake number 9, what we do is uh, we overexpose the trypsin to the primary cells. Now, obviously, when the cells become more than 90% confluent, maybe 95%, 99%, or maybe 100%, when you use trypsin, they actually leave the cells in the form of a sheet. And you see over here in this picture, they actually get separated. They are getting separated by the use of trypsin, but they are not actually getting separated individually. So you actually, the cells are detached from the surface, but it is in the form of a sheet. And when you further pipe it and break them, they are again bulky. They are in patches. So when these cells are pipetted off and recultured or subcultured, there will be a density variation onto the plate. There will be certain cells, there will be certain areas in the flask which will be highly dense. There will be certain area will be least dense. So in a same area, you are getting different cell density variation, and that again will lead to functional change in the result, functional change of the cells, and that may lead into change in the result while you are screening a drug over those cells. So we have to see that 0.25% of trypsin should be used to actually separate the cells, detach the cells, and generally we should continuously monitor the cells after every 1 or 2 minutes, or maybe 5 minutes in case of primary cells, because we are exposing it for a little long rather compared to continuous cell line, that whether our cells are detaching or not. Because when we detach the cells actually glow. Because when we see under the compound microscope, the cells actually glow, and and they become more of rounded shape. So that is one of the can say um, uh, criteria of proving that our cells are actually detached and they're free. And second thing is neutralization is very important. So we have we generally use 10% serum FBS. We also use uh, trypsin neutralization uh, factors to neutralize the serum trypsin. So that is very important to use, because this also plays a very important role in the viability and the performance of the cell. Finally, now the next mistake, or the 10th mistake, what we do, which actually compromises the result reproducibility or the experimental reproducibility using primary cells, is the passage and the population doubling. We generally think that passage and population doubling time is almost or very much near or same. The population doubling time is basically the time where there is a twofold increase in the total number of cells in a culture using a log phase. And a passage number is the number of times a cell population has been removed from the culture vessel undergoing a subculture. So when we are culturing a primary cell, we should rather be dependent on population doubling rather than passage number, because passage number is something which is very much person specific. One may split the cells into 1 into 2, 1 is to 3, 1 is to 4. That may change the passage number. So passage number should not be the direct relation to the age of a cell in case of a primary cell. Rather, we should very much be dependent on the population doubling, because that is the time taken by a cell to double its own density, and that tells its viability. That is a kind of a I can say a direct indication of its viability, how healthy they are, how happy they are. So if there is a change in the population doubling time for a same cell type, then there is a big question. So we need to take care of this population doubling time. Now, if you see, there is a relation. Using primary cell line for experiments past the expected population doubling is generally what we say. Let's say today I have conducted experiment using the primary cell. I have, and we are using the same condition which we have used in the previous experiment to validate our present experiment. No. Let's say you have a population doubling time for a primary cell at time A that would be different at time B. So you should never take previous results of an experiment to validate the present experiment. Because let's say the population doubling time of a primary cell today is x1, and tomorrow if it is x2, x1 is never equal to x2. So if the population doubling time, let's say, of a primary cell is 5 days, and today it becomes 6 days or 7 days, then this 6 or 7 days is not viable, because again it has taken a big more stretchy of it has taken more time to double its population. That means there is something wrong in the population. And this can be very much validated with this picture. If you see this picture, these are the astrocyte cells, and these are the GFAP expression, or marker expression of these astrocyte cells. When you see before thawing, uh, you see the complete 100% expression of GFAP marker in astrocytes. And after passaging, you see there is a huge decrease in the GFAP expression in the astrocytes. And that very much proves about the functional aspect of the cells. The expression is 100%, and that has reduced to 40%. So if you are taking the experimental perception or the experimental condition of previous experiment in terms of in case of primary cells to the present one, it will be a huge mistake. So whenever you are culturing a primary cell for a particular uh, drug screening, everything should be fresh. You need to uh, evaluate the doubling time, and it should be consistent. If there is a delay, there is a problem, and that may give you inconsistency in the result. Now, the next mistake we do is that we think that primary cells can be easily refrozen. We freeze the cells, okay, just like continuous cell lines. So it is not recommended to refreeze the primary cells, as this can promote senescence and can cause functional changes. I told you that if you're freezing it, you are actually playing, because it is in 10% DMSO. DMSO is a chemical entity which is an anti-crystallizing agent, but again, it plays with the viability. It reduces the functional efficacy of the cell. So primary cells are moreover recommended to use it at one go. Try to minimize the refreezing of the primary cells. Just like your media serum. Like, in the second, if you see, we generally freeze the serum also, or we generally freeze the growth supplements. So growth supplements have a lot of hormones, they have a lot of minerals and vitamins, they are temperature specific. So when you are freezing those media supplements also, which are very much specific to those primary cell, they may precipitate. They may become inactivated. So out of, let's say, 50 components, even if 5 components are not working, your results are going to be invariable. So whatever you are targeting, whatever you are trying to hit, in a condition, you won't be getting the result. You might be blaming to our cell, you might be blaming to contamination, you might be blaming to some other condition, hand-to-hand variation, but that might not be the reason. The scientist who is handling the cells, that might not be a person who is actually be blamed for. Actually, the conditions which we're using might be the main culprit. So we have to see that the growth supplements should not be refrozen in when we are using primary cell experiments or primary cell culture. Now, it's very, very important when we talk about the selection of right matrix, because I told you that there are two kinds of interaction in the cells. One is specific and one is non-specific. The synthetic polymers, generally the polyl-lysine, the D-lysine, they are non-specific interaction. This means whatever cell you put into, they simply interact with them. That is basically based on charge. So that is non-specific. Second is your naturally occurring proteins like collagen, laminin, fibronectin, gelatin. So they are highly specific uh, proteins, or the matrix proteins, which interact with the cells. And I told you that there is a cell matrix interaction taking place via integrin proteins, and there is a cell-cell interaction taking place via catenanes and clamidolins. So catenanes are moreover, you can say, calcium-dependent interaction, because the relevance of calcium is very, very important while we talk about cell-cell interaction. So here we are proving that, let's say I'm culturing a primary cell. If you see this result over here, the human coronary artery endothelial cells are cultured on 2 plates. One is coated with poly-L-lysine, and second one is coated with fibronectin. One is the non-specific and second is the specific. If you see the confluency of the cells under same condition. You see the confluence is around for 50 to 60%, maybe less than that. And here they are highly confluent. The cells are attached. They are moreover good in shape. So what can be inferred by this experiment? That whatever culture, whatever primary culture you're doing, the matrix is also can be blamed for. You have to choose the right matrix to place the right cells over it. It is not that a common matrix is common for every kind of primary cells, because again I told you these primary cells are directly coming from an in vivo system. They have a 3D phenotype, and the cells, the extracellular matrix or the receptors over the cell membranes, they interact with the gel, the coating of the matrix protein. So the acceptability or the accessibility of membrane receptors to the receptors of the matrix proteins are highly specific, and hence the attachment. So unless and until the cells are not attached to the matrix, they are not going to establish themselves. They are not going to colonize, proliferate, and further differentiate. So this is very, very important when we are talking about the um, culture conditions. So very, very important to choose right matrix for right cells. It's not a common matrix for all kind of cells. So selection of matrix is highly important to look into the result reproducibility in terms of primary cells culture experiments. Second is your media selection. We have two kinds of media. One is the basal media. Generally, you can use DMEM or the alpha MEM. They are certain media where there is high serum requirement, and they are generally used for almost all kind of cells. They have basal components. And on the other hand, we have special media where we have less of serum requirement, but more supplements are over here. In case of primary cell cultures, we should be more dependent on specialized media rather than your basal media. Why? Because this basal media is having more of serum content. Now, we generally try to reduce the serum concentration in the primary cell culture, because serum is something which actually induces more of proliferation. So they have factors which actually induces more of proliferation of non concerned cells in our cell culture, in a primary culture, and that may marks the effect of the real cells which we need in a culture system. That is very, very important, that the requirement of serum should be minimized in a primary cell culture. Rather, we should replace the serum with certain lipids, carbohydrates, or maybe the hormones, uh, and other supplements which can uh, compensate the requirement of serum in a primary cell culture. That is very, very important, because there is again a crosstalk. So when you are culturing a cell in a serum, that is going to minimize or mask the efficacy of primary cell to a greater extent. That's why we have to look into this thing. Now, these are the certain components of serum. The basal media is having inorganic salts, amino acids, vitamins, carbohydrates, and serum are having these components. But we need to see that when we are culturing our primary cells, we need to replace certain components of serum with the factor which can compensate their activity. Like I told you, that lipids, the carbohydrates, or the hormones can be added, and certain factors which are highly proliferative nature in serum should be reduced or minimized. Buffering system is very, very important again. This bicarbonate buffering system is a low intensity, you can say it's least toxic system. So, but this bicarbonate buffering system needs 5% CO2, and it is highly recommended in case of primary cell culture. Heaps is an organic buffer. It becomes highly cytotoxic because it doesn't need 5% CO2 condition. But people use it at certain conditions. But generally recommended that buffering system should be very much, we should use sodium bicarbonate. And the pH is very, very important, because the osmolality is directly governed by this pH. Osmolality is a big factor when we talk about the nature of the media supplement and their direct action on the cells. So osmolality should be in the range of 280 to 290 milliosmolar, and the pH should be in the range of 7.2 to 7.6. But one more thing, when we are making a media, or when we are putting a media, adjusting the pH to 7.2, what happens that in a due course of incubation, there is accumulation of lot of waste and these metabolites, toxic metabolites, and that may lead to acidity. So that 7.2 pH shifts further down to 7.1, 7, 6.9, 6.8 towards 6. So that becomes more acidic, and that may compromise or may hinder the efficacy of the culture condition. So we have to see that we should keep it at a higher range so that while it is incubated, it is actually reached to a optimal range after a certain point of time. Now, there's a study over here which tells you about the dependency of serum should be minimized. I told you here is a study where a human dermal microvascular endothelial cells are taken, and the medium generally is the DMEM, after the basal media is used with 10% FPS, the fetal bovine serum, and in the other condition, 5% FPS with endothelial cells growth supplement is used. So we have different concentration, 10% FPS, 5% FPS plus endothelial cell growth supplement. Here, this is a specialized media with 10% FPS, specialized media with 5% FPS plus endothelial cell growth supplement. Now you can easily see day 1, it is almost common. When you see day 3, you observe that the media supplemented with 5% FPS plus the growth supplements, they are highly confluent. They are showing good culture conditions. They're showing good, you know, uh, activity over here. You see, and but you see here also in case of ECM with 5% FPS, in case of specialized media, it is further much better. If you see over here, it is 60%. It is almost 80 to 90% in same interval of time. So it can be proved that when you are using a specialized media or a basal media supplemented with a good factor with reduced quantity of serum, it may good a good activity. It may show a good activity because you see over here the cultures are quite healthy and good compared to the culture supplemented with 10% FBS, because FBS is almost, you can say, it's a kind of a culprit in primary cell culture as far as drug screening is concerned or the efficacy is concerned. It minimizes the efficacy some way or the other. Now, there's another aspect of optimal media selection. Here we can tell you about a primary cell of different sorts need different media. Means you can't have a common media for different sources. You can look at this experimental result over here. We have taken a renal proximal tubular epithelial cells for humans system from human, mouse, and rat. Now here over here, it is the epithelial cell media optimized for human is used, and here we are taking the mouse cells and we have used epithelial cell media optimized for human and epithelial cell media optimized for animal, and the same thing for the rat. And if you see the result, the epithelial cell media optimized for human is giving a very good result for human cells, but the same condition when I'm using a human epithelial cell media optimized for human, they are giving a bad result, you can say a poor result when I'm using on an animal cell. So again, it tells you about that the media should be highly selective when we are choosing a cell line or a primary cell. It should be very selective. It should not be that a common media can be used to any kind of cell line, and that may again lead to variation in reproducibility. Now, this is a kind of a small flowchart we can say over here. Now, you see, when you start a culture, we are more dependent on serum media, because serum is something which supports the nutritional value of a cell, because they are baby cells. They are just put it into cells. We need a serum, a good supplement, so that they may adhere to the flask and grow. So at the start, we need to have serum. And then as soon as we progress in the experiment, we should become more serum independent and more, we should have a chemically defined media. If you see in our chart, this is basically a evolution of mammary cell culture media. So we can start with the culture with serum media, then we can reduce the media, the serum content of the media. We should try to have a serum free media, and then further we can go for the replacement of serum with other chemically defined source, so that we can have a actual reproducibility of a result which is highly consistent. Because when we talk about serum, why I'm talking about this thing is because serums are taken from a animal source, and animal source can be highly variable. If you are taking a blood from a region A, region B, region C, the blood components or the serum components might vary, and those variability in the serum component may lead to variation in the result reproducibility. So it is very, very important while choosing a condition. So we should be least dependent on serum and more dependent on a defined media so that we can get a consistent result in a system. So
Dr. Amrish,
that is a magic. Yeah.
yeah, sorry to disturb you, but
Sorry,
yeah, so we have a time restriction with the Zoom. So if you can, go a little faster, that will be great.
yeah, I'm just finishing it off. I'm
Yeah,
just
yeah,
getting
yeah.
it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So this is our body serum. This is one of the study which has told you about the gist. Now, if I say, this is very important. When we talk about the conditions which actually are responsible for the reproducibility of the experiment result using primary cells, the electrolyte composition and the carbohydrate content is very, very important while using animal media. Generally, the media is having an oversupply of phosphate and less of calcium. Calcium is highly important in a serum, in a media, because calcium plays a good self-signaling role, and it helps in proliferation, it helps in attachment, it helps in differentiation, and many more things. So the calcium should be, the limitation of calcium should be very much regulated. Now, a typical blood plasma glucose, right now, if I say what is the glucose concentration in our body, it's in the range of 5 millimolar. But the amount of glucose which we use in the media is around 25 millimolar. It's 5 times more which we use in the media. Again, we are playing with the conditions. And again, we are expecting the same result. That has to be taken care of, because most of the continuous cell lines, they are highly dependent on glycolytic mode of generating the energy rather than the TCA pathway. So we have to see that we should have a process where we are highly dependent on the energy of mitochondrial energy supply rather than the glycolytic pathway, because of the oxygen stress, these cells are using glycolysis. And again, our body uses glycolysis under emergency system. Means our glucose are getting metabolized using glycolysis, but again, the the, the lactate is again creating a cytotoxicity in the system. The gender of this donor cells is again very, very important, because let's say if I'm taking a cell from a male cell system, if it is a male donor, then what happens? We have estrogen receptors which are found on those cell system. And exposure of male cells to the estrogenic media, generally the phenolic red, they are structurally similar to the non-steroidal estrogens, and that may have an effect that may lead to estrogen receptor dependent influence on cell proliferation. So again, the terms of cell proliferation and differentiation and metabolism. It's very, very important to look into the gender. In case of female cells, there is a condition of X chromosome inactivation that may lead into variation of the change. And the last one is the mycoplasma. It's an idiotic condition. It's condition, it's mask. Mycoplasma detection is something which is not easy, and it is seen very later in the system. So uh, whenever you are purchasing a cell line, or whenever you are uh, um, ordering a cell line or sharing a cell line, you should always culture it in a quarantine lab before shifting into your main lab. And even when you are culturing these ordered cells, or when you are freezing ordered cells, it should be in a separate liquid nitrogen tanks rather than your main tank where you have kept other cell lines, because it may cross contaminate those things. It's very tedious, very slow, very silent killer. So the last slide for this is the factors governing the poor experimental reproducibility. So these are the factors. Due to insufficient, incomplete, and inaccurate reporting of the methodologies, we have poor reproducibility. The practice of reporting the best results only and ignoring those experiments that are failed again yield the expected outcome, and that lead to a poor reproducibility. Means we are in a race of getting only good results. We're not looking into the bad ones, and that bad ones are more important. cutting edge discovery is unavoidably associated with high rate of false positive result. And this is what I'm talking about. False positive results are certain things which is killing our research, killing our funding. And there is no obligatory organization of SOP. This SOP is very, very important. When we work, we use SOPs in the field of in vitro toxicology. So there should be a repository of SOP, or there should be a panel which look into the consistency of SOPs. The SOP should not be changed lab to lab. It should be something which is highly consistent. It should be used at a gradual way. Now, these are the measures to improve reproducibility, ensure in-depth understanding of cell model, pay attention to the irrelevant details which you don't take it, like selection of plasticware, coating, and types of medium you're using. Be aware of what an experimental readout actually detects, like viability, because viability can be detected by a simple cell count. You use hemocytometer for cell counting. So the viability is direct relation of how many cells are viable in your plate. But again, there are other conditions like ATP detection. Again, that may also measure the viability. So measuring a viability only on terms of how much cells are present in the wells is not the correct way to looking into the validation of the experiment. And provide all information in your reporting that is necessary to precisely produce a experiment. So these are the certain things which we need to take care of while making our experimental setup successful and make it highly reproducible. This is a survey which I had put it into, but this is something which I have already discussed. People may go to this also, but this is not that. I have taken it from ATCC. This is a survey which tells about the what are the factors of reproducibility, that why there is a lack of reproducibility around the world, because there's a peer pressure to publish the paper. Publish, and that's why people are in a rat race to get it into, and that's why they are simply, let's say they are running 100 experiments. If they are getting good results in 10 experiments, they are picking only those and leaving the rest, and that is the result of failure of the experiments in terms of reproducibility. So if you see, academic person are highly suffer, 72%, government is least, and the industry is around 60%. And age also matters. If you see the age group, the less than 40 people who are a new aspirant into a research cell system, they are highly concerned about the reproducibility because they have to grow in the field. So these are the certain factors which are looking into the reproducibility. Second factor is research who were unable to reproduce research in the past believe that the prime reason for being reproducibility was unable to have a correct methodology. There is a lack of a correct methodology to come out with a consistent result. So these are the certain surveys which are there. I think these things have already been addressed. This is the last slide. If I say the failure in reproducibility leads to financial wastage of time, loss of trust, missing deadlines of the research targets, loss of slowing down of professional advancements, and so on. So the reproducibility, these are the two factors which are highly responsible for that is a major concern in reproducibility experiment. So these are certain surveys. This is not something which is directly related to experiment, but surveys which are needed to be discussed over here. And this is the survey for a cell line, the sources of cell line. People generally outsource the cell line. They share the cell lines from their friend labs, their sister concern, or they don't order from the vendor. Like there are many vendors, they actually authenticate the cell lines. They work a lot on the purity of the cell lines. So just to save money and just to have a shortcut, they actually share the cell lines from the friends, from their colleagues, from their partner labs, and that further down the line leads to failure of the result. So it is very much recommended to have um, a cell line from an authenticated source rather than getting it from your colleagues. Thank you. Thanks for listening to me. Over to Dr. Vipul.
Thank you, Dr. Amrish. That was a really, really insightful and wonderful webinar. I would now request our CTO, Dr. Sachin Kadam, to please take the stage and do a short Q&A session with Dr. Amrish.
Thank you, Vipul. Thank you, Dr. Amrish, for an enlightening and very informative presentation on repairing reproducibility. I appreciate this mysterious area is more or less clarified now. The importance of reproducibility in science is very well explained, especially the part where you have discussed the common mistakes researchers do while working in the cell culture lab. I'm sure now we will able to avoid these mistakes and carry out our cell culture work more efficiently. Thank you so much, Dr. Amrish. I also, I also like to thank our audience for their very active participation in this webinar. I'm sure you all will have also benefited like me from today's informative talk. My request to all the audience to fill the feedback form. This feedback form will definitely help us to serve you more efficiently in future webinars. Since this is a series of webinar, I request all the audience to register for upcoming webinars too. I just want to say something. Like about the Koshika. So Koshika literally means cell in Sanskrit. It is like, you know, and we are engaged in providing these high quality primary cells for research purpose. Our specialty is 100% customized primary cells. We believe in empowering your research via our primary cells. So remember us when you need high quality authenticated primary cells for your research. I declare the session is now open for question and answers. Many questions have already been answered in the chat sections. Still, I'll take few questions which I feel more important and we can discuss with Dr. Amrish. So Dr. Amrish, there is one very good question asked here, and it is like, how much time required to transfer the culture from basal media to chemical media? It will grow with the same growth rate, and is there any changes we should expect while doing this transfer?
There will be a change expected, because when you are talking about basal media, we are moreover dependent on serum. And serum moreover promotes, it's a nutrition supplement, so it moreover helps us to establish the cell culture into the flask, number one. Number two, it helps to establish the colonies and make a monolayer. Maybe it helps in attaining the confluency. Now, once the cells become confluent, we need to shift from proliferation to a differentiation mode to make it more functional, because that is the thing which we need, so that we can screen our drug, we can talk to our cells with the drugs and to get a result. So we should see that when the cells are confluent, when the cells are almost reach to 90% confluency, and when we're shifting towards differentiation, we can reduce the concentration of serum and we can go into the specialized media. Maybe let's say after a first media change, maybe a second media change. It depends upon the cell line, because all cell lines doesn't have same doubling time. Like if I say the fibroblasts, they grow very, very fast. When you talk about like 3D cells, they grow slow. When we talk about neurons, nerve cells, they again grow very, very slow. So depend upon the doubling time, depending upon the proliferation nature. As soon as we are ready for making it differentiated, we should go for a complete media.
Thank you. Then there is a question on enzymes. So many people have asked similar questions. I have just collated into one question. What are the different types of enzymes available for dissociation, and why do we have to select trypsin for dissociating cells during trypsinization?
Trypsin has been used for quite a long time. It is not only the trypsin, it is trypsin eritiae complex. We generally use in the concentration range of 0.25%. Trypsin eritiae, I think everybody should know what is the role of eritiate. It's chelating agent. It actually prevents the clumping of cells, and trypsin do the work of cell dissociation. So you can I mean, since it has been used, it has been validated for a quite long period of time using secondary cells or primary cells, and as a proteolytic agent, trypsin has been used. And I think that has to be carried away. There won't be any problem in using trypsin, and we can also use other proteolytic enzymes from plant source as well. I mean, a plant source or maybe a microbial source, and you can use it, but it depends upon what is the specificity for it. Because when I talk about trypsin, it is not cross reacting with the cell culture. That is the biggest issue. When you're using a trypsin, it should act like a catalyst. It should not involve into the reaction process to get out with the additive result. So that's why we go for a trypsin to minimize the cross reaction and just acting like a proteolytic catalyst to dissociate the cell.
There's one question, like when you mentioned about false positive results, somebody have asked, like, what do you exactly mean by false positive or a false negative results, and how do you discriminate between them?
False positive is something which is not existing, but still it is existing in a result. That is false positive. False negative is again, whatever result you are expecting is not, it should not happen the same way as it is. So false positive is something, let's say, in a cytotoxicity experiments, let's say there are a lot of noise, and that noise we keep it in the form of, let's say, there are A and B components there in the culture, and we are expecting that B component is leading to cytotoxicity. But it is not the B which is cytotoxic, it is the A component which is creating a cytotoxicity that leads to false positive. Whatever we have the expectation, it is not the same player who is doing that thing, rather the other player is doing the same thing, and that is the false positive result for that experiment. So I guess I have explained my.
Yeah, it's very much clear. Then you also have few slides on cross contamination. So somebody's asking, how do you separate these cross contaminated cells from each other?
Cross contamination is something a big issue. See, at one hand, I say that we should avoid subculturing of primary cells, because cross contamination is something which is very much eminent in primary cells, because we are isolating it from a tissue. Now, when we are isolating it from a tissue, we need to promote more of our cell of interest and subside the cells which we don't need. But there are certain fibroblast cells which are very sensitive to growth conditions. So let's say if I am culturing a hepatocyte, HepG2 cells, or if I'm culturing keratinocytes or kidney cells, the HEK293, what happens that these are continuous cells. If I'm using primary liver cells or the hepatocytes, the fibroblast associated with them, they are actually masking the effect of actual cells. So the step one we can do is that we can subculture it one or twice, and then we can try to make it more a pure one. Number two, the best one is to have a specialized media, and the specialized media is something which is hitting, or which is only taking care of our cell of interest and leaving the rest. So that is very, very important, to have a selective or a specialized media which can nurture the cell of interest and leaving the rest. And in this way we can wipe out the contaminated cells from our culture and make it pure.
Great. I think we have taken almost all the questions. I again thank you, Dr. Amrish, for a wonderful presentation. Hope everybody have benefited from your presentation now, and they'll be more efficient in their cell culture technique now. So thank you so much, and thank you all the audience for participating. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for listening. Shall I wrap up?
Yeah, please.